Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Talk Junkies. It's gonna be a little different today. Johnny and Jesse are not MIA, but they're just gonna take a week off. I didn't want to do it yesterday. They didn't want to do it tonight, so we're having Dan on again, man. Dan from the Constitution of Us on Facebook, but more than that, he's part of Talk Junkies. It feels like as many times as we had you on, sir. But we greatly appreciate, and I greatly appreciate you coming on tonight. What's going on?
Oh, bunches, man. I mean, like we were talking about, there's just tons of stuff going on in the news. It's almost hard to keep up with now.
It is.
With
It's wild. The amount of insanity that's going on, and again, like we were talking about, it's like how much can we really even have a conversation about right now without jeopardizing the amount of people that would be able to see this video, with the shootings in Wisconsin, the riots, not the protests that are going on there right now. It's insane, man. It's crazy. The hurricane that just hit down south. We just got hit with some pretty hard thunderstorms as well. But yeah, it's just a lot going on.
yeah, and and the more that all this stuff happens, the more I keep thinking that we're going to see a huge change in this country in November.
Yeah, I think it's leaning towards that way. You've already seen a group, I don't know if it was Antifa or BLM or whoever it was, that were planning on having the 50 for 50 march or something like that. Like 3 days before the election, they were going to head to the White House and protest and stuff like that. And you heard
Hmm.
that the White House has fortified they've added some walls or something to make it further away for you to be, you can't get as close to the White House as you used to be because they had these planned protests that were going to happen before the election. So it's insane, man.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, with all the stuff that we got going on when we were talking earlier, I think one of the things that all of us can really start looking at as something that we can kind of educate ourselves on and be prepared as far as an avenue forward that we can all pursue to make change that doesn't involve um, protesting and all that kind of stuff. Um, is our court systems and the things that we have going on with court. Like, did you catch the Michael Flynn, General Flynn story? What's
Uh,
going on with that?
there's been so many different people that within the Trump administration that's been, in some sort of uh, court ruling or system or whatever you want to call it. So no, I've heard of it, and I've probably been briefed, or not been briefed, but did my research on a little bit. But I get it confused with all the other people that they've tried to go after.
Mm. Well, he was a member of the Obama administration, but he's always been, the story is, he's always been a real solid stand up, America first kind of guy. And he was that way throughout the Obama administration. Well, when he got tapped to come into the Trump administration, um, Obama lost his mind because of all the information that General Flynn had that pertained to the things that, or had access to, that pertained to the things that Obama had been doing. So they decided that they needed to kneecap the Trump administration by taking out Flynn. Right. So they cooked up all this nonsense and went after Flynn. And, you know, long story short, we end up into this year where it comes out that the whole prosecution of Flynn was made up and fabricated, and that when it happened, the FBI had actually withheld information that would have exonerated Flynn and made it so that it was obvious that the charges couldn't stick, that he hadn't done anything. And this was after he had already agreed. He had already done a plea deal where he agreed to plead guilty and then participate in the prosecution of some other people. He would testify in these other prosecutions. Well, this year, they Justice Department said, because of all of this information, we're going to drop the charges against Flynn. And the judge stepped in and said, well, I'm not going to let you drop the charges. We're going to keep prosecuting this. And the Justice Department is like, well, we're not prosecuting, so I don't know who's going to be, taking up the case against him. And that's kind of where the judge is and the courts are right now with all that. They seem to be trying to force the prosecution of this guy.
So if there's no one prosecuting him or the Justice Department, they're not going to do it. So the judge still wants to do it, even though that they said, no, hey, we don't have anything here. The dude's clearly innocent. Nothing really to see here, but they're still wanting to progress this to this day.
Right. Yeah. The judge who was on the case and the D.C. Circuit judges who make up the appeals court and the judges in that district at large.
So initially it was the Justice Department that was prosecuting him.
Yeah.
And then once you don't have a prosecutor, like you said, in any other situation for a normal citizen like ourselves, if we go to court and there's no prosecuting attorney and they drop the charges, then you're a free man to walk.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So that should pertain to him as well. That's crazy. And like for the FBI to be involved, and it's legitimate, you can find information saying that they withheld evidence.
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, some of the things that have come out, Peter Strzok is a name that's come up a good bit. He was one of the lead investigators in the whole Flynn thing. And Peter Strzok actually altered information and altered evidence in order to make it so that it appeared as though Flynn had done something illegal. But one of the big illegal things that Strzok did was he went to General Flynn and approached him and did not tell him that he was interviewing him in relation to an investigation. He basically walked up to him and said, "Hey, can I ask you a couple of questions? I have some things that I need to ask you some questions about." And nothing professional or anything like that, just us talking. But then he put it all down on record, right? And he phrased the questions in such a way so that it made it seem as if General Flynn had lied about something that he didn't lie about.
That's aggressive.
Yeah.
Like that's too much. And does he have proof that was the case, or was there a full recording to where you could clearly see that he was trying to frame him basically?
Well, Strzok wrote notes down. He wrote notes. He's got it's amazing. He documented all this stuff and he's got notes where he says, okay, we got Flynn. These are the questions we need to ask him. Right. And this is what we need him to say.
So basically what Dan and I are about to do is we're going to go into the court systems for all of you out there, and we're going to just dive a little bit deep into it because it's something we should educate ourselves on. I've listened to a lot of good podcasts on what you should do in situations when you go to court, but I think that Dan's going to enlighten us a little bit with what he knows and what he's been a part of and done research on and stuff like that. But sorry, I just wanted to tell the people what we're about to do. I just think it's crazy. And this Strzok guy, how do you say his name?
Strzok?
Yeah, Strzok. He's not facing any tampering with evidence, or he's not facing any charges or anything like that?
Not yet, but we'll see, because it appears that Durham is starting at the bottom and moving up. So he's got an attorney that altered evidence that was presented to the FISA court, and that attorney has entered into a plea deal. I don't know that the details of that plea deal have been released yet. I haven't seen them, but I would imagine that it's going to require him to give up some pretty substantial information to not be prosecuted for, the evidence tampering and the perjury, or for any of the other stuff. I mean, because they've only charged him with one thing, but they can always, in a plea deal, you can make a plea deal very focused, and you can say, okay, we're going, if you agree to cooperate with us, we won't prosecute you for this one thing. But then they won't tell you about all the other stuff that they have pending that they could charge you with.
Right. So in the case of Michael Flynn, like you said, the prosecutor dropped the charges. So now, which was it, a Supreme Court judge, did you say, or was it a circuit judge? Or
it's a circuit judge.
So how can they even begin to try and still prosecute him?
That's the whole thing that's crazy about this, is that when the Justice Department moved to dismiss the charges, the judge started taking actions independently to continue the prosecution. And one of the things that he did was he appealed this motion to dismiss, and took it to what if you've ever watched Viva Fry?
I haven't.
Montreal. Okay, he's a YouTuber, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and he talks about the Michael Flynn case a whole lot. One of the things that he pointed out in that was that this Judge Sullivan, took this motion to dismiss and sent it to an en banc or en banc hearing, which is all the justices in his circuit, all the judges in his circuit sit down and decide. And all these judges, most of whom are appointed by Obama or some other liberal, ended up coming back and saying, basically, Judge Sullivan, you get to decide what you're going to do with this. Even though nothing that Judge Sullivan is doing falls within any kind of range of behavior of the courts prior to this. Everything he's doing is brand new ground. Right?
So we got
I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you that, the important thing with all of this stuff is less. The important thing with this is what you talked about earlier about, when we were talking earlier, and you said that, a lot of this court stuff, you don't, it's kind of over your head. You don't really get it, right? Well, this is the important thing about this Flynn stuff, is that 90% of the stuff that's happening with this Flynn case is over most people's heads. And the reason that it is because it's all illegal. This is none of this stuff is stuff that should be happening in our judicial system, because the Constitution provides that trial by jury should be happening in basically all cases. In other words, if you and I have a disagreement, over a contract, or you and I have a situation where one of us is accused of committing a crime against the other, we don't deal with a prosecutor under the Constitution. We don't deal with the government on that. We deal with the jury, right? We bring that issue to a jury, and a jury makes a decision.
Right? I would be curious on how many cases out of all the cases in the United States actually go to a jury. It seems like just maybe large cases within the city that it's in.
Almost none of them go. Most of them, the prosecutors attempt to push to a plea deal, and they use all kinds of intimidation and harassment to get you to go to a plea deal. Basically they use a whole bunch of legalese to say, yeah, if this goes to court, if this goes to jury trial, I can't help you. And the jury's going to hear this, and they're going to throw the book at you, and I can help you out now, right? If we do this plea deal, we can do it for lesser charges, and I'll go in and I'll tell the judge that you were cooperative, and he'll reduce your sentence, and on and on and on. When the truth is, the prosecutor is a political position. The prosecutor doesn't have any interest in any of this stuff except in what his record is going to be. Right?
Do you know when the prosecutor was first installed into the legal system by chance?
I don't.
I wonder if in maybe I don't know if it was the 30s or 40s, or I wonder how long it's been. I'll have to look into that, because you're right, it is political affiliated, and you shouldn't be worried about what your prosecuting record is. And you see the movies or you read the books, the John Grisham books and stuff like that, where that's all they care about is saying, hey, like I have a 100% conviction rate or 99 or whatever it is. That's not how it should be.
Right. And the thing is that with with our judicial system becoming a political system, there's so much stuff, or having become a political system, there's so much stuff that gets washed out and makes it a unjust system. Justice, the thing about justice is not necessarily equal, right? If you and I both commit a crime, right? If you and I both commit a crime, the circumstances of that crime do matter, right?
Yeah.
Who did we commit the crime against? What was the motivation for the crime? And that's why these laws that are passed by Congress and the state legislatures and even the cities don't have any application to our criminal system, because the jury is supposed to listen to the facts of the case and make the decision, right? If you have two people who break into two different houses, right, and steal basically an equal amount of stuff, right? One of them broke into their family's home, okay, and one of them broke into a stranger's home, okay. The jury gets to hear that and make the decision on how they're going to behave about that, how they're going to handle that. And they can take into account the testimony of the family, right? They can take into account the testimony of the people who don't even know this guy that broke into their house. And then they can make their determination on what would be the most just ruling and sentence and punishment in a case like that.
So is that how it used to be? They would talk with the people that were involved with it, not knowing or not there when it happened, but like you said, close friends, family, or the person's house it happened to. They would actually ask for their opinions and what they think that should happen.
Well, that would be the case that would be brought. See, if we had a situation, if there was a crime that was committed, say that I came over and I stole your lawnmower, right? Okay, you'd probably thank me for that, but okay, I stole your lawnmower, right? Okay, we would go to court in our current system. We would go to court, and you don't matter in our current system. What's happened to you doesn't make any difference. They assign a value to all of that stuff, and they make a determination as to what I've done as far as how it affects society, which makes no difference, and I'll pay a fine to the government. You end up getting the lawnmower back that, I ran all the gas out of, right? So you're out the gas and you're out the use of it, and but nothing else. You don't get any justice. In the way that our system is set up, you would be the one who would be coming into court and presenting a case and saying, okay, look, here's the situation. This guy, I've never liked him. He's always bothered me. He comes over and takes stuff all the time. I really am sick of this. And I've tried everything I can to do this. And the jury can go, really? Wow. Okay. Well, Mr. Cox, here's the situation. You're going to need to pay Paul and buy him a brand new lawnmower. And you're also going to need to stay away from his house. If you ever come onto his property again, this is what's going to happen. Right. And
Yeah.
they can tailor all of that specifically to the people who were affected and make a just decision and mete out a punishment and a sentence based on the actual crime. Right. Like we have laws right now that say something, a particular thing happened, and the prosecutor was able to alter the details enough to make it hit a certain dollar value. And at that certain dollar value, this crime becomes a first-degree felony, right? Well, it's not really a big, the money value of it or the crime itself was really not a first degree felony kind of crime, but he's managed to tick it up to that amount and turn it into something that he can really use a whole lot of pressure on you for. Right. Whereas if it's a situation where this is you dealing with the jury directly over a crime that has happened to you, you can tell them directly how this has affected you and what the real dollar value is. And then they can come to me and they could say, okay, you need to compensate him for this, and you have this amount of time to do it.
Well, you can still represent yourself, though, right, in court? Like, in an instance where you stole my lawnmower, and let's say there were a jury, if I wanted to represent myself without a defense, it's still an option. I mean, it's
without
not
a defense, yes, but you can't prosecute it.
Okay.
You can't take it to court. If I came over and I stole everything out of your garage, right? And the cops came over and they looked at it and they go, well, Paul, you mostly had just junk in here. None of this stuff was really valuable. I mean, we're looking at it and everything you've told us, this stuff is maybe worth $250. We'll file a report. We'll tell the guy to stay away, but you don't have a case, man. Right? You just don't have a case. And you say, well, what about I had a car in here. Yeah, well, Paul, that car was worth, realistically, come on. That car was worth $200, right? Well, to you, that car is worth more than that dollar value. And to you, it's an issue that is something that's worth pursuing. But we've got a situation now where our constitutional rights and the Constitution itself has been so marginalized that you and I, who are supposed to have direct access to the courts at all times, have to go through all of these hoops, have to jump through all of these hoops to get there. You can't charge me with a crime. I can't charge you with a crime. I can never get that to court, no matter what, because there's a prosecutor, a district attorney, there's a whole set of the police, there's a whole set of hurdles that you have to jump through just to make that happen. And if you can't make any of them believe that a crime happened, it didn't happen.
Right. And we've talked about it many times, the Constitution, and in my opinion, I think what's so great about it is that it's common sense. And I know we've said it before, but if you read it, it's something that you can understand and apply into real life within how you live your life. It's common sense. Like I said, that's the most beautiful thing about it. But somehow we've gotten away from it. And a podcast that we've really, really wanted to dive into is the corruption within prisons and how it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is the result of that. It's just the amount of money that's being made and facilitated within these organizations when it comes to how much money they get. I think that's the answer. I mean, you look for the answer, and it always comes down to money. And you look at the prison systems and see how much money that they make. They get free labor whenever they have a mass population in there, and they say, hey, you want to go work? I mean, you're going to go do this and that, but it's going to be for free or dollars on the penny, and we'll give you some cigarettes when you get back to jail. I think I think you always look for the dollar signs, and that's what it all leads to. But how we even got to like prosecuting attorneys or district attorneys and all of that, you're right. I need to do my research on that, and I'm like I said earlier, I'm curious to know when the first prosecuting attorney was even a thing.
Mm-hmm. And when we look at the system that we have, here's the amazing thing about prisons. Prisons have no application to justice. Okay? If someone commits a crime and you lock them in prison, you have done absolutely nothing to help the person or to solve the problem that was caused by that crime being committed.
So can you go back, and again, I know you know a lot, but like back in 1776 or, in the early 1800s, do you know what prison was like then?
Well, it used to be that if, there were still, at that time, there were still things that you could get locked up for, but basically, if you went to prison, if you were locked up in jail, your family was responsible for taking care of you. You know, if you were in jail, they didn't have meals provided, they didn't have clothes provided, they didn't have bedding provided, none of that stuff. You know, if your family didn't provide it for you, you weren't getting it. You know, unless the jailer himself was somebody that you know felt like he wanted to take care of you or help you out or something. But for the most part, these, you know, people weren't being put in jail for years and years at a time.
Right,
They
unless
just
they
didn't have the facilities for that.
right, and then they just slowly started popping up, and I think that's the biggest thing that again, the reason we want to have a podcast about it is the fact that you're right, nothing gets solved whenever you put these people and incarcerate them for years and years on end, especially self-isolation. I think that's the most egregious thing. I've watched a few documentaries on that, and just to spend 23 hours in a cell for 10 to 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, like, that's inhumane. I don't know who developed the policies on that, or even who even allowed that into legislation for it to apply to American citizens. I mean, I know there are some heinous crimes out there that deserve looking into, but like you said, I think the way to do it is find the cause of the issue, try to help them, and a lot of that stuff comes to education as well, and how they were brought up and all this and all that. But I think we do have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing too is that with this, when you start talking about putting people in prison, there's a lot of inhumane things that happen there, but also at the same time, there are people who cannot be reformed, right? There are people that a community can look at and say, we don't ever want this person to be around us again. And we don't have any obligation here in the United States to keep those people in the country. If someone commits a crime and the jury doesn't feel like, you know, that executing them is something that they can morally approach, there's no reason that they have to say, put them in jail. They can say, yeah, kick them out. You know, find the border, push them over to the other side and tell them to fend for themselves because they can't be an American anymore. To keep them here, and there's no reason to have these massive prisons, because the prisons basically are you making restitution to the state. And what crime was committed against the state? Nothing. The state can't be harmed. You know, the government can't be harmed. Then, you know, someone gets murdered. If someone gets murdered, there's no harm that happens to society from that. You know, the person who got murdered and their family and the people that they care about are the ones who've been harmed, and we need to do something to rectify that situation. And if the person who did the crime is not someone from whom restitution can be gotten, then we need to figure out some better way to handle them than putting them in prison. Does that make sense?
No, it definitely makes sense. 100%. I mean, the amount of tax dollars that go into prisons and all of that, you're right, it helps no one. I mean, the effect of when someone gets killed, I think, depending on the person, the effect can be greater, you know, whether it be a small child or, you know, it's a celebrity and it shouldn't matter, but someone in the community who's well known by many people. I think that depending on the person, can have greater effects on the community as opposed to just one person. But no, I completely agree. It makes sense.
Yeah, and that's, you know, see, that's the beauty of the Constitution is when you read through it the first time or the second time, and you kind of absorb some of the stuff. It's a whole lot of information to take in, you know. But as you start reading it and thinking about it, and looking at it not as individual things, individual ideas, but you look at it as ideas that are intended to come together to form a coherent system, then all of a sudden you look at it and you go, oh, I see how all this stuff works together. There's nothing in Article 1, which has everything to do with legislation. There's nothing in Article 1 that allows for the Congress to pass laws about what is and isn't a crime. or what sentences should be, right? Or to establish prisons. All of that stuff, as far as crimes are concerned and punishments are concerned, is put basically in one phrase in Article 3, where it says the trial of all crimes shall be by jury. That's all it says. The trial of all crimes shall be by jury. And it doesn't put a limit on that. You know, later on in the Bill of Rights, it says that you can't appeal a jury verdict, right? And that a jury trial has to happen where the crime happened. So judges can't even change venues. I know you've heard about judges doing that.
Yeah,
that's illegal.
well,
That's illegal.
Don't you think? I mean, in order to apply those things in today's world, which they 100% should be applied, but we've gone so far on the other side, or so far away from the Constitution, that if we tried to apply that, you know how hard it would be to find an unbiased jury, no matter where you are, for whatever crime it is, would be extremely hard.
Right, but you're not guaranteed an unbiased jury. That's just it.
But
that's
but with the amount,
that's something that's just been inserted.
Yeah, no, I agree, but like, again, for how far we have gone, with the amount of propaganda that's being pushed down each and one of our throats right now, and inside of the tissues of each brain cell that we have, I agree. You know, it's not guaranteed that it's not going to be a biased or unbiased jury, but it would be so hard now to apply that with the amount of propaganda. You know, let's say you commit a crime and you're a Republican, and you commit a crime in New York and you get a trial by jury, and it's a whole bunch of Democrats. Like, you know, I mean, you're pretty much screwed at that point, wouldn't you think? Or in California.
Well, that's just it. Is it if you take the law away, if you take all this legislated punishment and legislated crimes away, and the jury is left to deal with just what you've done, right? Just what you've done. They have to decide whether that's a crime or not, right? And the whole point of the jury is that the jury is supposed to be the people who live where the crime occurred, so they know potentially the people involved. They know or have some familiarity with what kind of a situation this might be. All right, so this is not foreign information to them. So when we start talking about, you know, a group of guys goes from one neighborhood to another and beats some people up, right? The people who are in the neighborhood where those people got beat up are the ones who are the jury.
Yeah, so that would entice you definitely not to do that, especially if you're from a different place.
Not only that, but you know, the people who are living there also know the people who got beat up, and they can come back and they can say, yeah, here's the thing, is that we know that all of you guys are troublemakers, and we guarantee that you guys, you know, we've got told that you guys had done something that provoked this, and we're willing to believe it, even though we you know, there's not a solid amount of evidence to prove that. We still believe it, that you guys did something. So we're not gonna punish these guys for coming in here and beating you guys up, right? So that's the thing, is that when you have a jury that's familiar with the area where they are, you know, instead of being unbiased, because unbiased in a lot of cases ends up being not unbiased, it ends up being ignorant. You know, when you try and find people who are a complete blank slate and don't know anything, then you basically have gotten rid of all the people who would be truly qualified jurors.
Isn't it insane the amount of depth of which the current establishment has gone through to get us where we are today? Because when we sit here and have conversations like this, Dan, it blows my mind on how much it makes sense to do something what you just described, and how it should be. And it's definitely not the end-all be-all, but how the Constitution, again, the foundation, and all these things, how they're supposed to apply, is so beautiful. And isn't it weird how they're trying to disengage the community, how they're trying to make us narcissistic, about ourselves, not involved in the community, stay inside your house, watch TV, be on your cell phone. Don't go out and meet your neighbors. Don't go out and be a part of the community, which there are people who do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it has slowly diminished and shrinked, I guarantee you, in almost every city of America, to where not everyone in their communities are involved. Like, there's a reason why they don't want us to be the juror of a crime that happens on my block or in my city. Like, they're taking these things away from us, and we're no longer engaged in our own communities with human interaction. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is that that is all about removing any kind of personal responsibility from us, right? They want us all to be servants and slaves.
Right.
They want us all to always look at the government and say, government, what are you going to do about this? When the fact is that the government doesn't solve problems, it creates problems. You know, it is a destroyer. That's why governments are good at war, because they can go through and destroy stuff. But when it comes time for building and creating, when it comes time for solving problems, government is the worst tool for that.
And you wonder why. And I talked about this, I think, 2 podcasts ago with Johnny, and we talked about infrastructure. And now it makes sense on how you just described it. And then how I just put it into context is the fact that we're not engaged anymore with, and sorry, this is just like a sub note, and it just clicked in my head. That's why you see infrastructure falling so rapidly within the United States, is due to the fact that we're relying on the government. And if they're not going to help us out, then it's just like we don't know what to do, because we're so reliant on the government. We don't know the outlets. It's, man.
Yeah, it's, you know, here's an example from my neighborhood. The neighborhood that I live in is not a new neighborhood. These houses in this neighborhood were built in the 60s, the 1960s. So the infrastructure here is old, right? And you know, I walk around the neighborhood, you know, just see people, just to, you know, say hi and just to get a little exercise. Well, for 3 months now, there's been these 2 houses that I walk past that have water running down the street on both sides of the street because the water lines are cracked or broken. And I mean, this is definitely hundreds of gallons a day, and could possibly be, you know, thousands of gallons a day of water that's just streaming out. You know, these houses have standing water in their yards. Now, I don't know where the leak is, but I've called I to your point about we're relying on the government. I've called the commissioners of public works that are responsible for the water, and told them today, again, this is 3 times that I've mentioned it to them. Nothing has happened. No change has been made. No exploratory dig or anything like that. And the people who live in those houses have to know, right? But at the same time, it's not something that you can go out there and start digging on and start doing something about, because as soon as you do, the government's going to come over and ask you what you're doing.
Right.
Right. And if you mess something up, boy, are you in trouble.
Right. That's true. Yeah, it's wild when you finally realize a lot of the issues that we're having is the fact that we're so distant from each other, because, like I said, man, it's the way the establishment has built us to be over the past, you know, I don't know how far back it goes, but it goes back pretty far.
Well, it goes back to at least to my great grandfather, because, you know, at that time, when my great grandfather was a young man and he was alive, he worked for a mill. They made textiles, and he worked and was actually able to save enough money to buy 400 acres of land. Right. Well, his children ended up leaving the area where he was working And instead of building their family right there where generations of my family had lived, they moved all over the state, all over the state of South Carolina. And then, my parents moved. So now we don't have any connection to the places where we used to live. We don't have any connection, and places where we can take responsibility. We don't have any roots anymore. Think about how many times people move. And I'm not immune to that. I've moved all over the place. I lived in LA, I lived in Orlando. I've moved a whole bunch of times to different places. But it's amazing how many of us do that with the idea that we're moving to something better rather than looking at what it is we're leaving. And so much of it is exactly the fact that we have been left in a situation where we have almost no responsibilities, right? And that sounds on the surface sometimes good, like, having no responsibilities, man, that's great. But when you really dig into it, when you don't have any responsibilities, that is a soulless, empty existence.
It is. And I don't know, it's gotten to a point for me where, like, I'm honestly close to just throwing my cell phone away and just getting a flip phone, because it's just taking over, you know what I'm saying? And it's just not a good feeling. And, I just, like you said, it would be nice to have some roots. And, man, like, in your situation, you think about it, if your family weren't to leave and then your parents passed it on to you and you have 400 acres, I feel like that's kind of what life is, like leaving your kids better off than how you had it. But yeah, it's worked. You're right. And it probably goes back extremely far for however long that they've pushed this agenda. And I know a lot of people will take it back to big oil and how the oil has conquered our way of life. I don't know the route, and I don't think we're trying to go down that road, but it's working, Dan. And I think we've had multiple podcasts on how we think we can change things. And it's just having podcasts like these and educating people about, hey, it's okay to have responsibility. And I know there's a lot of people out there who do take on responsibility and who do that every day. But I'd say the masses or the majority of people don't. And that's been their goal, and they have been successful. And this is the end result of what is happening. Do you equate, and this kind of ties in a little bit, but whenever you had the early 1900s and you had the Spanish flu, World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression all in one, do you find any truth that maybe every 100 years some crazy shit happens to alter generations for the next 100 years? Or is it just kind of how humans are?
I think that certain things do build up. Certain energies build up and have to be expressed, and we're coming to one of those points right now, right? With all these clashes that we have going on, we've got an oppressive ideology that is trying to keep us all under control, coming up against what is the rising ideology of, I think, the Constitution and personal responsibility. People are looking around and they're going, working with the goal of retiring is empty. If you get a job with the idea that you're going to work and work and work and one day retire, what about all the time in between? Right? It's an empty existence. I remember when I was a kid listening to people talking about that, and that whole conversation was not that simple. But when I peeled away all the stuff, that's what it really sounded like to me, is that basically what they were saying was, I want to do all this work so I can retire. It's like, well, why don't you just retire?
Yeah.
Skip all the work in between and just retire.
But we don't know we don't know how to take on responsibility, so it's not an option for most people.
Right. And the thing is that with all of these responsibilities being taken away from us, we end up with all of these things that we use as substitutes. You listen to any Jordan Peterson?
Yes, I love Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson is fantastic, and one of the things he talks about or a couple of things he talks about is slaying dragons, and the adventure, seeking adventure, right? Responsibility is an adventure. When you take responsibility for something, you put on a load, and you say, I'm going to move this from here to there, and you get to gauge whether you've been successful with that. And those responsibilities that you take on are your own, right? Some of us end up in situations where responsibilities end up being dropped on us and cause a bunch of resentment.
Because you don't know how to handle it when it's just dropped on you.
Right. Because we've got all of these people who have been directed to this idea of not, instead of responsibility, of being happy, right? So everybody's looking for something that is going to make them feel better right now, or in the short term.
Instant gratification.
And not paying attention to the consequences of those things, not paying attention to what the implementation of this plan is going to cause. So you end up with young girls who end up getting pregnant, right? Because they think this guy's going to stay with them, or they think that they're, all these different things are going to happen. And you do have some women who end up in that situation, and they go through it pretty well. They take it on, and they go, wow, this is not at all what I expected, but I better buckle down and figure out something. But then you have a whole lot of other people who end up in that situation, and they become resentful and angry because it didn't turn out the way that they thought. And I'm not blaming them for that, but that's a responsibility that we as a society need to take on and say, okay, we need to start educating people about what your choices mean, what the consequences of your choices are. Right? This is a conversation that I've had with a few people as far as choices, right? Choices. When we look at the choices that we make, are we truly looking at the real choice, or are we looking at the consequence of the choice? Right? I don't know if you want to get into something this heavy, but we can talk about this as far as like abortion. Okay? People talk about abortion as far as a woman's right to choose, right? My body, my choice. Okay? And I will agree with those statements. But if you're going to say that, you have to look at the choice. The choice is whether you have sex or not. The choice is not the child. The child is a consequence of the choice. If you choose to have sex, one of the consequences is pregnancy. So it's not my body, my choice when it comes to the child. It's my body, my choice when it comes to sex. After that, we've got a totally different situation, right? And it's that kind of stuff that we have going on that we have been misled about. We've been lied to about in order to keep us under control, in order to make us think that being happy is what we should be pushing for and not being responsible. Does that all make sense?
It does. It completely makes sense, because when you're a kid, you're taught, like, what is it that's going to make you happy, And just for me growing up, born in 89, like I said earlier, it's just instant gratification. Ever since the technological era has begun, it's literally, when I was in 9th grade, once, our 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, that's whenever internet started booming, early 2000s. and it was slow at first, and then each year it gets faster and faster and faster, and then you expect more and more and more. And it's just, whenever you want to be happy, it has to happen like that. And then if not, then you suffer the consequences of it, and you get angry and you don't know why. But yeah, no, that all that makes sense, man. And it frustrates me because I think that I could be in a better place if that weren't the case, So now I'm having to teach myself responsibility at the age of 28 when I had my first child. And that's a different responsibility than the other responsibilities that I could be taking on in my life. But it's something, and that's honestly, Dan, I think that's when it hit me that I had to learn what responsibility was, is when my first child was born. Because up until that time, I had none, man. Zero. Mm-hmm. Absolutely none. And it just makes me wonder if whenever these global elites, and maybe it's been for the entirety of the earth, for human civilization, has always been this way, because you can go back to kings and queens and they did the same shit. They had peasants and all that stuff. It makes me wonder if truly good were to take over this world, where would it be? And that's just I don't know. It's deep.
Well,
man.
if we keep moving, if we continue moving, not in the direction that the globalists have been pushing us, but if we keep moving in the direction that we've been going since Donald Trump got elected, right? I think we are going to see some very, very positive change.
It's only 4 more years, though, man. That's what happens after those 4 years. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the Constitution. I mean, term limits and stuff like that, but he gets a lot of things done in 8 years. There's nothing to say that all that just... And I know you can't be that way, and you can't say, oh, well, after 4 more years, it's going to be shit. But, I mean, that's in the back of my head.
Well, after 4 more years, that's when we have to take responsibility.
True.
Because
Very
he
true.
stepped into the gap. Here's the thing, is that when I am convinced that he's going to be reelected in November, okay, and when his second term is up, those of us who've benefited from the changes that he's made are going to have to take responsibility, because he will be fully exposed. He may have Secret Service protection, but if someone who is of this same globalist mindset goes into the White House, then they have the ability to manipulate the protection that he has. Right? We are going to have to take responsibility, and we're going to have to pick somebody who is not a politician again, because our Constitution is not made for politics. It's not made for politicians. Our Constitution is apolitical, because when you talk about politics, what you're talking about is what you want the government to do. Right? Yeah. You and I can have different opinions about what the government should and shouldn't do, but all of that becomes meaningless when we look at the Constitution, because the Constitution is the agreement that you and I have about what the government can and can't do. Right?
Yep.
So you and I have a decision. We want a much bigger military, and we want all this stuff. Well, guess what? If we keep electing people who are willing to do everything they can to give that to us, we are undermining the Constitution itself and the protections that it affords, and we're opening the door for other people who have very different ideas to do the same thing. If we're not willing to sit down and agree and abide by the Constitution, then we set ourselves up for a situation where we become just like any other banana republic in the world.
Right.
Because we are the only free country on the face of the planet, period.
It's slowly slipping away, and you're right. Before COVID and all this shit happened, I mean, people, including myself, I thought we had it bad. I was like, damn, like every podcast that we had was so dismal and so, I mean, not all of them, but I mean, you listened to a few of them before COVID and all that, and I mean, I thought that was bad then, but then all this shit happens now, and it's just like, it's literally hanging by a fingernail, a ripped fingernail. Mm-hmm. That's how it is. And just for anyone out there, and Dan, I know that there was this one time that I asked you to convince me, Johnny, and Jesse that Trump is the real deal, because in my opinion, I'm still like on the fence. Like, is the president a puppet? Is Trump legit? Is the things that he like his executive orders and stuff like that, is it really making good change? And I'm still a little bit on the fence that the president actually has meaning, that they actually do things that impact, the United States. But then I listened to his the RNC convention. What was that, like 3 or 4 days ago? And his speech, man. I mean, it was like JFK like the opening of it, how he talked about the establishment, the corruption, the media, and the corruption of media. Like, it sounded like it was JFK, but it was Donald Trump. And whenever you talk to conspiracy theorists, and a lot of them, I'm not trying to group all of them into what I am, but I sent the video to Jesse. I was like, hey, man, watch this video. I was like, I know you don't think Donald Trump does shit. I know you don't think the president has any meaning. I was like, but listen to this speech, man. And it was a powerful speech. He texted me back, and he's like, damn. Like, he's calling everyone out.
Yeah.
That's what JFK... That's what JFK did, and that's what everyone wants. So, like, JFK was the last good president. He talked about the corruption of everything, and here's Trump doing the same thing.
Trump is very much like JFK in the way that they have been raised up. He was raised in that environment where he was rubbing shoulders with these people that he's about to bring down. He's not guessing about what their plan is. They've always assumed that he was part of it, that he was in for it. Right? That's why they've turned on him so viciously. Before he ever mentioned, until the day he mentioned that he might run for president, they really didn't give much of a thought to it. When he announced that he was running for president, they lost their minds because he knows where the bodies are hidden. He knows what these people have been up to. Right? He knew Jeffrey Epstein. He knew Jeffrey Epstein, and he told Jeffrey Epstein, "Don't come back to my place." He even told Jeffrey Epstein, he said, "Guess what? I know what you're up to, and because I know what kind of person you are, I'm going to buy this piece of property that I know you have your eye on, so that I can stop you from doing what it is that you're doing. You have to go do it someplace else."
And I think a lot of people will go to just how, Trump's this playboy, and he's obviously doesn't have the bright or the sexiest past of all time. Everyone has cobwebs in their closet. Everyone has shit that they do that they regret in their life. And I think Trump, just because he's president, doesn't mean he doesn't get that. You know what I'm saying? Just because he's up here in this pedestal, now he can't have the dark cobwebs or the dark secrets, and people will hold on to that. And they're like, oh, well, Trump's a pedophile, and Trump knew Epstein. And I texted you, and I was like, well, what about what Trump said with mobilizing the military with Operation Warp Speed, with the vaccines for COVID when it comes out? It's just those small things, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying I feed into the first two, that still make me question his legitimacy.
And I'll be honest with you, what the things he says about the vaccine stuff, those set off alarm bells with me too, because I will not be vaccinated. I will not be vaccinated. I don't care.
I'm right there with you.
They can shoot me in the head, but they are not shooting me with that vaccine.
Right.
Period. Because I've seen too much of the stuff that happens with it, and I don't care what any of these people say. The stuff that's in the vaccines, what we have today as vaccines, are not what they had as vaccines when your parents and my parents were kids, or
right.
even when I was a kid.
When you got like 6 shots and that was it, and now you're getting like 50 to 60 by the time you're 5.
And the fact is that those vaccines that I got when I was a kid, they didn't have all these extra chemicals in them.
Right.
All these preservatives, and those vaccines had to be tested. These vaccines today don't have to be tested. And there's no liability for the companies that put them out.
They can't be sued.
They can't be sued. And if there's any kind of damage, there's a limit of liability of $250,000.
Right.
Now, you tell me that you're going to be able to take care of a child who has permanent brain damage, take care of that child for their life with $250,000.
Right.
There's no way.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. And the one more thing I'll bring up, that I watched this video, and and I've sent you a few videos, and you've kind of like talked me down a little bit on, when Pompeo, I sent you that video, and then you're like, hey man, you need to watch it in its entirety and understand what the true context of the speech was, as opposed to just listening to that 1 minute clip that everyone plays whenever you see Mike Pompeo saying what he says about the CIA and the secrets that they hold. I can't remember exactly what it was, but you're like, listen to the whole speech, or listen to the 5 minutes before and listen to it in context. And that's what a lot of YouTubers like to do, is they'll just play a 1 minute clip of someone saying something, like in Michael Flynn's case, they twist his words around. I mean, I listened to the whole thing and I'm like, okay, now I see, what's really going on and what was truly the meaning behind that speech. But when Trump in the 2016 presidential debates, when he was going against Hillary, he had that one moment where she had said something about if he were to ever run the country, and he's like, that's right, because if I were president, you'd be in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? His acceptance speech at the White House, he literally tells Bill and Hillary Clinton to stand up and give them a round of applause, because and I don't remember exactly what he said, but I'll send you the video. He's just like, I want to thank you very much, Hillary, for a good campaign. You worked so hard, and I respect you and Bill so much. Like, to me, that was
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, to me, it was just fishy. You know what I'm saying? Like, what? Mm-hmm. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You were saying you want her in jail, and I know it's because you want to appease people, but then at the White House correspondent or the White House dinner where you're coming in, it's just like, why would you say that?
Well, there's some other White House dinner stuff. I'll have to find these videos and send them to you. There's one where he roasts her brutally. I mean, he goes after her about Haiti. You heard about the Clinton Foundation in Haiti, right?
Yeah, I watched the documentary on it.
Okay, during one of those White House press dinner things that she's there for, he goes after her about Haiti. In making some kind of a joke thing about it. But he hits her right between the eyes.
How hard do you think it would be to put her in jail if you're Donald Trump? How hard would that truly be? Are they that high establishment to where it's impossible?
I don't think it's impossible, but I think you've got to really erode the foundation that they've established. I mean, this is a former president of the United States. Bill Clinton is a former president of the United States. He didn't get to that position. He didn't get to that position by accident. He had solid connections. He was not an opponent of George H.W. Bush. He and George H.W. Bush were allies. We were going to get the same thing.
The New World Order?
Yeah.
That's what we're getting.
In 1992, when George W. Bush and Bill Clinton were running for office, it was not a real choice. We were going to get the same thing no matter which one of them went into office. Right? But Bill Clinton was able to do it with a little bit more shine and polish and make people swallow that bitter pill much more easily than George H.W. Bush did. George H.W. Bush was a bit ham-handed, right? He was not a likable person. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, he can come off as a likable person.
Little kind of like Barack Obama, very well spoken and just looks good to the public for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're people who don't. They're all image. They're smoke and mirrors and not much substance.
Right.
There's nothing to them. And that's what that's the legitimate point that you guys are coming from when you say that you don't believe the president does anything or means anything, because we've been fed that same bunch of stuff for a long time. Ronald Reagan was the last real president that we had, right? George H.W. Bush was there as he was in charge of the New World Order, but he was making and pushing that agenda, but he was he had his minions out doing all the stuff. Oliver North and and going in all of these different directions. And he was the one who was really behind Bill Clinton. That's why Bill Clinton was going on, TV and playing a saxophone and doing all this other stuff. He was being an entertainer, and then you had George Bush, George W. Bush, who was, God, I don't see how that guy can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. He's an idiot.
Man, what was it? What funeral was it? That it was him and he was arm locked with Michelle Obama and she was with Barack, and they were at a funeral, and it's a funeral, and George W. Bush is up there like dancing, like not even kidding you, just dancing. And Michelle Obama's looking over like, what is he doing right now? This is on national TV. Like, the dude is crazy.
Yeah, he's just, he is just a mental midget. But those are the kind of people that we end up with, and this is why, when you guys say that when you and Johnny and Jesse say that the presidency is kind of empty, I get that, because it has been. And the difference, in having come into this whole thing and seeing that with Donald Trump coming in, it's hard to look at it and see him as anything other than more of the same. Right? I even catch myself with that. Like I said, there are things that he says that set off alarm bells for me. But I look at it and I go, whatever he may be, and all the things that I'm not sure about, I am sure about where we would be with Hillary Clinton.
Right. And I
am positive.
And that's the point you made. I want to say it was not the last time we had you on, but the time before that. That was the point that you made, that, I mean, anyone with a sound mind and would be like, you're right. Like Donald Trump's the clear choice here. If we're going to have another 4 years of someone, I think the clear answer is Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Hands down. I mean, I think that there's this sense of wokeness right now, or not wokeness, but people actually waking up to the political arena when it comes to Democrat, Republican, or whoever's going to be president. Because think about it like this, Dan. COVID happens. All sports are gone. No sports are being played. Literally every American's just on their phones or TVs looking up information about the pandemic that's going on. And then it's still, I mean, sports are very limited right now. And you have the election coming up. So many more people are aware in this movement right now with the elections that are going to happen this year on November 3rd. Probably more so than in a very long time here in America. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm right there with you. I do think that Donald Trump will win in a landslide, actually. They had him down in polls at first, and I'm like, I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. And then now he's leading polls, I believe. I could be wrong in some polls that they're showing. I don't think it's an option to have Biden as president for 4 years. That's not an option. Because if it does, man, I don't know. I'm scared for what would happen.
Especially with Kamala Harris as his VP.
Right.
Because that she is not going to be somebody who is just going to be
she was a
shrinking violet.
Wasn't she a prosecuting attorney?
Mm-hmm. She was.
In a position that should have never existed.
Yep. And so she's fully aware of how to manipulate the law to use it to her political advantage.
Right.
Which is exactly what the law should never be here in the United States. The law is, especially when you start talking about criminal stuff, the law is supposed to be there to serve you and I. It's not there to be serving any kind of a political agenda. And we need to get back to that.
Agreed. It doesn't, and at that point, we get back to that, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I mean, if we all get on the same page, man, and we get down to that foundation that you and I, or we always talk about when you're on the podcast, the foundation of the Constitution, and we apply that in today's time, everyone owns up to their responsibility. I mean, I don't know, man. Each time we have a podcast, I learn something new with you. That's all I know. And I love it, man. But I think, yeah, that's what we need to do.
Because the a life with responsibility is not the burden and the drudgery that we've been sold. Right? We've been sold this idea that it's all of this terrible thing, but that's mainly because most of the stuff that we've been told are responsibilities of our own are not our responsibilities. Right? I remember a long time ago, I really kind of clued in. I started my own computer business in 2003, and it was going along really well. And I decided it was time for me to bring on some employees. Right? I had enough business that I could hire a couple of people and be able to have hours for them and have enough money to get them paid. Right? And I really needed to do that at that point for the growth of my business. But as I was thinking about that, all of a sudden, what I was talking about doing really hit me is that when you hire people to do stuff, you're asking them to take on your responsibilities.
Yep.
And when you ask somebody to take on your responsibilities,
You're opening up a can of worms.
Right. It is, and it's not just a simple, I'm going to make more money kind of thing, and it's not something that I can lay on you. Right. If I hire you as an employee, those responsibilities don't suddenly become yours. I'm giving you money to handle my responsibilities.
Right.
If you don't do it, but you put the time in, I'm paying you for your time. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm not happy with what you do, then okay, I can go ahead and let you go. Right? But at the same time, I'm asking you to I'm not asking you to take on responsibilities. I'm paying you for time to do my responsibilities.
That's tough, man.
Yeah. And we've gotten so far away from an understanding of responsibilities and duties, things that give your life meaning.
Yep.
We've gotten so far away from that we have gotten to the point where most people don't look at, and I don't think they should look at their job as being something worthwhile. Right?
Right.
Your job or your career is just something that you do to occupy your time and make some money, but your responsibilities lie somewhere else, and that's where we've gotten pushed off and distracted. Our responsibilities lie within the people that we have within our own lives, and the things that we can accomplish within our sphere of influence. We have very little that we can mostly do in our own jobs because of the fact that somebody is asking us to handle their responsibilities. We're very limited in what they're willing to allow us to do.
That's not healthy.
Right?
That's not healthy for human development. That's just, yeah. Again, man, we're going to have to dig extreme. We're going to have to reach deep within who we are to pull ourselves out of what situation we are in. Because,
and that's right there. One of the great things about the Constitution is that if we lay that out and we use that as a plan, as a foundation, a lot of the stuff that we need to do to become more responsible is all laid out for us.
Right.
It's amazing. I mean, it really is amazing. One of the things, like Kyle Rittenhouse, the Kenosha
right.
kid.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Kyle Rittenhouse is being vilified for doing something that we're all supposed to do. The Constitution requires us to have a militia, right? A well-regulated militia is one of the things that's required for the maintenance of a free state. That's the Second Amendment. And what does the militia do? The militia goes out and maintains order. And who's the militia? It's me and you. We go out and we say, okay, yeah, this is not happening. You guys are not burning down this place. You're not rioting. You're not doing all that stuff. Right? And we especially don't allow it from people who are outside of our own communities.
Right.
I mean, think about if you and I live in the same community and I get all mad about something and decide I'm going to burn down somebody's house, and you come over and you say, Dan, that ain't happening.
Right.
Just stop. That is not happening. You're not doing that. You know, oh yeah, Paul, I'm going to do it. Nope, Dan, I'm telling you right now, if you do what I think you're getting ready to do, what you seem to be getting ready to do, me and these other guys, we're going to use force against you.
Right.
We don't want to do that. But if you force our hands, that's what we're going to do. And that's America. That's taking responsibility and saying, look, there's ways to solve problems, and violence and rioting and looting, none of those are on the list of solutions. None of those. Right? We did all that. Right? We did all that, and we moved to something better. Because we're leaving behind the way that things have been done for thousands of years. That's the page that got turned when the Constitution was written. We moved to establishing a new way of forming society and of having a government that actually serves people, not people who serve the government.
Right. Well said, man. I'm gonna end it there. That's a beautifully way to end it. Honestly, you couldn't put it in any better way at all. And just to imagine if that were to be applied within this society, 325 million people, how beautiful it would be. How beautiful it would be. We're human beings. We're flawed individuals, as Jesse always says. We're not always going to get along, man. But I think that there's a common goal for each and every single person that walks foot on this great country. Is we all want to be happy, like you said, Dan, but it does come at a cost. There are responsibilities that we have to take. And honestly, we've probably we've been away from those responsibilities for too long. So there's going to be some work to do, some added work, some extra work, some overtime that America needs to do to get it back the way that, or to get our America back.
Yes.
To get it back to what its true foundation and what its true meaning is.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure, man.
I think we can do it.
I do too.
Can do it.
When we have talks like this, man, and again, I learn something new every time. I think we can. And honestly, it doesn't, for me, it's not going to be like trying to like go out to downtown Kansas City and try and change everyone. It's going to start in my own community, man. And getting to know people and being closer to people that I live next to and my friends and my family and all that. That's, like you said, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Rock on, man. Well, again, appreciate you coming on such a short notice. I got to work tomorrow morning. I don't usually work on Monday morning, so that's why we do it Sunday nights. But tonight was just different. So, again, thank you for doing it. Literally, I texted Dan around like 8:20 p.m. Central Time. I was like, man, you trying to get on the mic? He's like, yes. Saving me from a shitty movie. And I'm like, all right, let's do it then, man.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Rock on, man. Well, I appreciate it. Yep. Yeah. I'll shoot you a text here soon, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you too. Thanks a lot, Paul. Have a good night, man.
You too, brother. We'll see you. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dan. Always a pleasure bringing him on the show. I truly do enjoy having him on the show. A lot of good things that I've learned, and I'm not going to hash on it anymore. I think you guys got the gist of what that podcast was about, and hopefully you learned something from that podcast. I know I did. Got a lot of responsibility that I'm going to have to get on top of, and that all starts for me very soon. And I'm going to start taking responsibility in other ways that I never have in my life. And a lot of it is due to this podcast, man. The people and the connections I made within this podcast are beautiful. And I truly appreciate each and every one of my subscribers that watch an hour each week of their life to tune in to Talk Junkies and watch me, Johnny, and Jesse, and our guests that come on. You give us that time, and I greatly appreciate that. So the least that we could do is give you great knowledge and information each and every single week, and we do try our hardest to do that. We could try a little harder. We could take on responsibility and give you a little bit more knowledge, and we'll do that. So the best thing you can do to support Talk Junkies, honestly, is just share this video. Share it to, just get on your phone, go to phone book, click all, and just share Talk Junkies, baby. That would be legit. That would be awesome. That would be amazing. If not, just share it to one person. I don't care. Or no one. Just watch. Really, that's it. Hit that like button. Hit the bell notification to all our junkies out there. Stay fly and ring the bell.